Greetings virtual wanderers, Aeons here. What if I told you there's a Sims game that puts you in the shoes of an effortlessly cool main character instead of a generic adult doing tiring chores? You probably didn't know about it, and if you do, well, congrats. You played one of the most unique and forgotten games in life and social simulation history. Yup, the game is the Urbz Sims in the City. If you've never heard of it, it's basically a Sims spin-off set in a metropolis that focuses way less on traditional life sim mechanics and much more on building reputation. Today, we're taking a trip down memory lane both in vibes and gameplay, because we're going to dissect what makes this game so special for some. And stick around for the next part, it'll blow your mind. Just remember, if it does blow your mind, smash that like button and subscribe. We all know The Sims. The younger folks definitely know The Sims 4. Personally, I grew up on The Sims 2 and loved The Sims 3 when it first came out. But the Urbz was released right in the shadow of The Sims 2, which might be why it's so criminally underrated. It all started with The Sims 1 way back in the Stone Age, when you played games with the actual physical CD. It was the first Sims game, and it was a critical success. Naturally, EA started making the absolute hell out of expansion packs. But that wasn't enough milking for them. So they decided to make spin-offs. But no, they didn't go straight to the Urbz. They started with the Sims Bustin' Out. And finally, nope, still not the Urbz. The Sims 2 hit PCs first. And then just a couple of months later, the Urbz came out. That completely overshadowed its release, since The Sims 2 was the massive hyped up mainline game. In fact, I'm pretty sure that's the main reason why the Urbz got swept under the rug. The game was released on all major consoles at the time, the beloved PS2, GameCube, and the OG Xbox. It also dropped on handhelds like the Game Boy Advance and the Nintendo DS. But those two had completely different gameplay. We'll get back to that in a minute. When the game first came out, the internet was full of people showing off their Urbz wearing leather jackets, piercings, and street fashion. Listening to will.i.am sing in Simlish was peak 2004 pop culture comedy. But many players felt EA was trying way too hard to make The Sims edgy for teens, with some calling it an over-glorified, playable Black Eyed Peas commercial. The funny thing is, people actually considered the handheld version widely superior to the console version. Surprised? Meanwhile, PC players were way too busy playing their quote-unquote superior The Sims 2. But at the end of the day, the Urbz isn't really a traditional Sims game. It's a 2004 lifestyle simulator. It didn't sell quite as well as EA hoped, leading them to abandon the Urbz brand altogether. However, it immediately carved out a nostalgic place in the hearts of console and handheld gamers who wanted something weirder, louder, and distinctly mid-2000s. First things first, let's let the cat out of the bag. Between the console and the handheld versions of the Urbz, the games are surprisingly different. And suffice to say, I actually prefer the handheld version. The main differences lie in the plot, structure, world, and controls. Honestly, it feels like a different game in almost every way, but in a good way. The handheld version plays more linearly and features a real story, whereas the console version is just a set of goals in each area. It plays more like an adventure game rather than a sandbox built solely around grinding reputation. It definitely has more personality if you ask me. Now, the thing I personally hate about the Urbz on console is the controls. You use an analog stick, but you still control the characters using a point-and-click cursor. Meanwhile, the handheld version gives you direct character control with the D-pad. Not sure what the thought behind that was, but seems like they got lazy for their console counterpart. And then there's the world. Sure, the handheld version is in 2D, but it gives you way better exploration through a fully connected map. The console version feels like a chopped up collection of separate themed regions. I don't know, it just felt a step behind compared to the handheld version. But to keep things fair, our main comparison today will be the Urbz console version versus the mainline Sims, since the mainline Sims were all doing the same thing anyway. And I'll only touch the handheld version briefly on the comparisons. Let's start with the story. As most of you already know, mainline Sims games don't really have a linear story. It's a giant sandbox where the world is your playground. You can be whatever you want, marry anyone you want, and build houses however you like. In the Urbz console version, you technically have a story, but it's super minimal and mostly just acts as a background premise. The main goal is the thing called, well, goals. You visit 9 different districts, each with 9 mechanical goals that aren't really tied to a plot. Though I have to admit, I loved hanging out in Neon East just to party with the Tokyo cyberpunk ravers. Compare that to the handheld version, where every goal actually advances a central storyline. Oh, and oops, I almost forgot to mention, there are villains in the console version too, but even they don't give you much of a story. They're basically just a bully you have to beat by spamming the right power social move. Next up is another core loop, jobs. Let's start with the regular Sims. Jobs literally just means watching your sim disappear into a rabbit hole of a workplace for hours. Nothing really happens. You just wait around and get a paycheck. Well, at least for the early mainline Sims, that is. Luckily, in the newer Sims like The Sims 4, they actually give you some workplace action with the Get to Work expansion. It gives you an actual career with a checklist of tasks that you need to do. The Urbz takes jobs to a whole different route by making every single job an active minigame. That means your actual mechanical skills dictate your payout. Wouldn't you like that way better?
I don't know.
I know I would, but in the end, it all comes down to preference.
Approved!
Sometimes you might want to do a task with deeper thinking. Other times, you just feel like playing a quick minigame to get that bread. Next up might be the most interesting difference of all. Spoiler alert, all of the 3 games have their own design. Socializing in the Urbz feels way less repetitive than in The Sims, at least compared to The Sims 2 at the time. Regular Sims relies on universal interactions like hug or tell joke, which work pretty much the same on everyone, with relationships building slowly based on mood and personality meters. A pretty flatline system if you ask me, but in the Urbz, socializing is clique specific and strategic. You actually have to learn the local culture. A high society sim in Diamond Heights wants to be air-kissed, but if you try that on a punk in Gasoline Row, they will straight up slap you. You also unlock power socials, like a backflip or a secret handshake that acts like a special move to instantly boost your rep with a specific crowd. The handheld version has an even cooler mechanic, where each NPC has unique dialogue topics. You get RPG-style conversation choices, like talking about nature or movies, and every character has specific likes and dislikes, unlike its console counterpart, where it's all just about picking the right move. I don't want to yuck on anyone's yum, but I see the handheld mechanics as a major evolution for the genre, especially since modern Sims games eventually adopted preference-based conversations too. Don't agree? You can fight me on this in the comments below. Another big factor, the Urbz isn't a pure life simulator. In the regular Sims, half the gameplay is micromanaging bladder, hunger, energy, and hygiene so your character doesn't pee themselves in front of that hot chick you're trying to flirt with. Don't get me wrong, you still have needs in the Urbz, but they are way less punishing. You can sleep for like 2 hours and your energy bar will be full. so you can get on with your day for almost the next 24 hours. Also, you only need to grab a snack once or twice a day. I don't even remember because it's so trivial. So yeah, your main focus in the Urbz is building reputation, whether through partying, working, or networking, without constantly running home to use the bathroom. The life sim elements only sit firmly in the back seat. Now, the same can't entirely be said for the Urbz on handheld. It's not quite as forgiving as the console version, and your character could definitely interrupt and stop a conversation because your character wants to pee so bad. I don't know why we didn't talk about this sooner because it's easily the most distinct characteristic in the game: the setting. The Urbz takes place in a gritty, high-energy metropolis as opposed to the suburbs with a lot of usual greens of the traditional Sims games, unless we count specific expansions like Late Night or City Living later on. If I had to give the Urbz one clear definitive win over the regular Sims, it'd be for the pure vibes. Yeah, you heard me, vibes. The urban aesthetic is just so cool and unique. You're constantly surrounded by stylized NPCs, loud licensed music, and street culture. Each district has its own hyper-specific theme, from the high fashion glamour of Diamond Heights to the Gothbank Central Station. When sewn together, they create a world map dripping with personality. Seriously, let me ask you this. What other life sim has ever captured urban culture this well? It's really rare, especially where it ties to Job Simulator. I can't say for sure though, I might as well play the game just to reminisce the early 2000s vibes in a metropolis city. We mentioned earlier that half of The Sims is managing needs. Well, for some of you, the other half might be for building. A ton of people play The Sims strictly to design dream houses from scratch and decorate every square inch with their theme in mind. I can definitely say this is indeed the appeal of The Sims. In the Urbz, there is almost zero architectural building. You rent pre-built apartments and focus strictly on interior decorating. Instead of house building, the entire customization budget went into character styling. The clothes, tattoos, and piercings you put on your herb directly impact gameplay. Wearing the right gear for a specific district gives you boosts to your social acceptance there. Sure, character styling might not appeal as much as full house building, but it was a super brave mechanic that not enough games attempt. So +1 for design courage there. Looking back at how different the Urbz is from The Sims, the big takeaway that we can surely say is that the Urbz is a unique, one-of-a-kind game with almost no real competitors. Its approach to the life sim genre was a bold, fresh spin for 2004. So, just for fun, I tried looking for similar games. If you look for urban set life or social sims that aren't pure open sandboxes and actually have structured goals or even stories, the only real contender I found was an old mobile gem called Miami Nights by Gameloft. They do have other Nights games in the series like New York, Paris, and more, which are surprisingly not as similar as I thought, having their own little twist. But again, besides those two franchises, what else is there? I couldn't find any more, but if I missed some, please drop those games in the comments below. So the big question becomes, why are these games like this so rare out there? Is it just simply underrated because fewer people know about the Urbz? You know, since the release was overshadowed by the bigger and more famous The Sims 2? Or was the formula simply not as good as the original Sims design? Rather, a failed experiment on the take of how life sim games are supposed to be. What I can say for sure though, game mechanics wise, it was definitely niche at the time. Back then, The Sims and Harvest Moon were the only dominant social/life sims. The Harvest Moon formula eventually inspired Stardew Valley. And even now, there are a lot of indie games that have the same social formula as Stardew Valley. Oops, I mean Harvest Moon. Ultimately, even though the Urbz felt niche, I personally think it tapped into the exact right vibe and game design for a life sim. I don't know, maybe I'm just not into the boring suburban sandbox life, let alone farming in the countryside for crying out loud. So maybe I just prefer building street rep in a big city. So I really hope some talented indie developer out there watches this and realizes there's a massive gap in the market for a modern Urbz spiritual successor. Or who knows, maybe we'll just take things into our own hands. So that's it. Hopefully this video brought some awareness to a fantastic overlooked title and convince you to give it a try or even make it your next favorite retro game. Or maybe it's just me and my personal opinion, because I'm nostalgic and super subjective in loving EA's failed experiment this much. Maybe it's not underrated at all. It might just be bad altogether. And my bias for the 2000s urban vibe is blinding me. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want us to dissect more underrated retro games like this, don't forget to like and subscribe. Okay, that's it for now. And until then, happy exploring.